application profiles and endpoint groups. We just discussed the tenants, and now it's time to go more in detail with application profiles and endpoint group. Application profile. We mentioned that the application profile is where we classify all of our resources that belongs to a particular application. Let's say, in my case, I have a web application 1, and this application 1 can be, let's say this is like payroll. So it's a payroll web-based application, right? All the dependent components of this application are classified inside the application profile. And when I mean by components, it's endpoint groups, right? We have an endpoint group in which we classify a set of resources for this particular application profile. I just built an endpoint group called app SRVs or app servers. So in order for you to operate this payroll web application, you need a group of application servers, and then you need another group of database servers. So because on your server farm, you have 3 application servers and 3 database servers, you want to associate each particular resource into its own EPG, right? With this, I can selectively allow communication between the apps servers and the database servers. Do I need to allow full communication between them? No, I just need the application servers to be able to hit my databases. So why I need to allow every single port? I am only allowing the ports that are required for my application side in order for it to query my database. And again, this is where we insert a contract. So we have the endpoint group. We classify all of our member application servers for payroll inside an endpoint group, and we'll do the same for the database servers that are part of the payroll application. If this is all stored in a square, this is our application profile. Very simple. So we now have an environment which is completely software defined. This is why it's software defined. It's an environment where we create objects and we relate those objects together. We connect those pieces together to allow communication to happen because we're more granular with this way. We can then create policies particularly affecting specific devices or endpoints, right? So instead of our network being one giant core with a bunch of distribution switches, we now have a completely scalable fabric in which we don't care about what's the network. Well, we do care what's the network on the back end because we need to have some sort of bandwidth requirements, we need to have latency requirements, we need to have redundancy, we need to have all sorts of factors that will make an acceptable SLA or service level agreement. We need to make sure that we're complying in our environment with that. But from a logical standpoint, in ACI, your network is this: network, application, 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 right? This is what a network looks like in ACI, and inside there is a tenant. If we want to allow communication to happen, we attach contracts to allow that to happen. That's what it looks like in ACI, very high level. In a traditional campus design, everything is inside here. So the core has everything. You have no way to have policy-driven access-based enforcement. You can do ACLs, trust me, unless, the only network that you know of is a network that has been there for 50 years and you don't need to do ACLs for a lot of stuff, then fine. But for cloud hosting providers, imagine yourself having 100 tenants with different policies for each one and try to do that in an ACL. It's not going to be easy. That's the purpose of ACI here. So we have endpoint groups, and we mentioned that our endpoint groups are the objects in ACI where we associate or provide an identity to your endpoints, right? So let's say we want to classify web servers. So all of our web servers are going to be attached to an endpoint group in which I can then attach policies to it. I can say only this group of endpoints can talk to my web servers. So we got another EPG here. We got another EPG here. And we attach contracts to allow communication to this EPG. This is how ACI limits the access to the endpoint groups. So it's very granular. You decide what you want to talk to. You actually make the rules. You make the rules to tell if I have a DNS service, I classify that on an endpoint group, then I only allow port 53 for DNS queries. Everything else blocked. Why I need to have every single port attached or allowed from any device in my network if I only using this for DNS? It doesn't make any sense. And on top of that, it brings a lot of security issues. If you keep leaving ports open everywhere and there is an attack, your attack surface is way, way bigger. You spread. Your attack surface is then compromised completely because everything is able to talk everywhere, right? So this is ACI. And again, I'm talking from a single network environment or a single customer type of environment. When we go to cloud hosting, in which we are going to host multiple customers' environment, this is even more granular, right? We create a tenant, we associate their endpoint groups, we associate application profiles, and we create those policies to allow the endpoint groups to talk each other. That's basically it. Let's take a more deep look into the application profiles and endpoint group. Okay, so if you remember on our previous video, we configured that tenant web SRV farm. Inside there, we configure the application profile web SRV-app1. If we click this object, we can see the topology for this application profile. And as we start creating objects and associating objects, you're going to start seeing lines being connected here, representing what you're actually doing on a logical level. Policies, again, policies apply to the application profile. In ACI, every object will have a policy menu, or every section will have a policy menu in which you apply the policies based upon the level you are. So if I decide to apply a policy to the application profile, chances are it's going to be applied down. The hierarchy or the inheritance of that policy goes down from the application profile. So in that case, if I create a policy and attach it to this application profile, it affects both endpoint groups inside this application profile. Okay? Endpoint groups. So we know the endpoint groups are ways to classify our endpoints or our devices, and this is why it's called endpoint group. So we create a group for my application servers, and any device that is attached to this endpoint group will belong to the app server's EPG. We associate a domain, and we talked about on our previous section what domains are. So if you are still not too sure about the domains, I suggest you go back and take a quick review, and you're going to understand it in no time, okay? So let's go ahead and attach this endpoint group into my existing VMware Virtual Domain Management Association. So let's go ahead and select my vCenter domain. Okay, let's go into my domain, and let me attach a VMN domain to my app SRV EPG, so then I can associate my servers to this particular endpoint group. Right click, add a VMM domain association, and we're going to select my VMN domain. And you remember on our previous section, we discussed VMM integration. If you're still unsure of how this is configured, go back, take a quick visit to the video, review the video, and you should be familiar in no time, okay? Then, because it's a dynamic, we want to deploy it immediately. We want to select a dynamic VLAN. We'll press submit, and we are good. So if we log into my vCenter environment, let's go ahead and log in real quick. Okay, let's go ahead and type my admin credentials. Okay, we are logging in. And let's go ahead and take a look at my ACI VMM, and there you go. Now that I associated my endpoint group to this VMM domain, we now have a port group, dynamic port group, that the APIC just configured in my vCenter. So now I can use this to associate my virtual machines. Let's go ahead and select the database servers, and let's do the same thing. Right click, add domain, select, immediate, dynamic, submit. Let's go back, and boom, there you go. Second port group in vCenter that I can associate to my database server's virtual mix. So this is one way, and the other way is through a physical domain in which we don't have a dynamic push to VMware. We just have to manually configure a standard port group and associate a VLAN to it. which I am also gonna review and discuss. Okay, so now that you saw, again, we have our app SRVs EPG and we have our database SRVs EPG. Let's connect each one into a VM. Let's bring up a test VM. Let's go ahead and connect it, and you're gonna see in real time how everything works. Okay, so let me go now in my vCenter environment. I'm gonna go to my virtual machines, and I created a couple of test machines that we can use to demonstrate how you do that VMM domain integration to your endpoint. So we attach both the app SRV EPG and the database SRV EPG to our VMM. So now let's go ahead and associate this port group to our virtual machine. And I got a couple of servers already staged for this demonstration. Let me select SRV1, right click, edit settings, network adapter, and let's find that right here. So we got the app SRVs port group from ACI. We're just gonna associate that to my app1 SRV1. Press OK, and now this VM, it's part of the endpoint group app SRVS. Let's go ahead into that virtual machine, and I already staged an IP we need to configure on the machine, so then it sits on this bridge domain. Go real quick and change it here. Let's type 10.150, 1.10, 10.150, 1.254. Remember, 254 is my default gateway in the bridge domain for app SRV endpoint group. Press OK, close. Now, I want to see if it works. Let me go ahead and do a quick ping. My default gateway, 10.150, 1.254. Sure enough, there we go. Now let's take a look at the APIC, and I'm going to show you something real cool. Do you want to know what endpoints are associated to this EPG? Click on the EPG, go to operational. There you have it. My virtual machine MAC address, my virtual machine's IP address, and the endpoint name. And this is the endpoint name in vCenter. Okay, now let's do the same thing for the database SRV, my database servers. Let's attach them to these endpoint group database SRV. Right click my domain. Oh, by the way, I already have it configured, so I just need to select the server and attach it to the port group. Let's select one, right click, edit, change the network adapter to my endpoint group. Boom, connected. And let me take a look here. So the IP for this one is going to be 10.170.110. Let me go real quick. And let me change this on the fly. And let's go ahead and press OK. Close. And let me go ahead and CMD. Let me do a quick ping test. Ping 10, my default gateway. 1.254. Boom. Voila. Beautiful. Okay. So let's take a look at the APIC. And let me see the same. Operational. There you have it. App1 DB1. App1 DB1. Look at that. So I can see my MAC, my attached IP address or my assigned IP. Where did I learn that endpoint group? I learned that via a VMM domain, which it's been held in this particular ESXi host. This is where my VM is currently running from a compute standpoint in my ESXi host. And name of my VMM domain, Nexus-vCenter, along with the interface that is communicating via this particular interface into my ESXi host. There you go. But guess what? They are both on the same EPG. However, they cannot communicate each other. Let me take a look at that. Ping. From the application server, I'm going to ping my database server. I cannot. However, let me see if I can ping the 170 default gateway. I cannot as well. Why? We need a contract to allow that connectivity to happen, okay? So in our next video, we're gonna go into the fun, good old contracts, okay? Okay, everyone, in our next video, we're gonna take a look at subject filters and contracts. Thank you for watching.